Hello, everyone. My name is Kenny Anderson, and I'm the coordinator of employer recruitment and student engagement in the Professional Career Readiness Center here at Point Park University. I will be serving as your host for today's event. A little background about me and my role. As an employer recruitment and student engagement coordinator, I am primarily responsible for creating innovative and appealing events to engage students and employers together and with Point Park. I am also a major component in keeping stakeholders connected to the university and with the Professional Career Readiness Center. I found a passion for working in career development after completing a year-long internship in the Career and Professional Development Center at California University of Pennsylvania through my master's program at Chatham, for which I received my master's degree of counseling psychology in December of 2019. I believe that a great work ethic starts with a strong mind, body, and soul through self-exploration. Also, I bring a prideful background that I hope creates positivity through everyone that I come into contact with. So, in conjunction with the Literary Arts and Social Justice Department, the Professional Career Readiness Center would like to formally welcome you to the Literary Arts and Social Justice Career Summit. Point Park University Literary Arts and Social Justice programs invite students to immerse themselves in creativity, language, and understanding injustice. Graduates establish their own magazines, write content for national websites, work for nonprofits, publish poems in literary journals, and cover their local arts and entertainment scenes as freelance writers. Students and alumni have been invited to this professional development event to learn how English, creative writing, and social justice programs prepare them for completive career opportunities. Today, you'll hear from a variety of industry professionals as you explore career opportunities and reflect upon the value of a literary arts and social justice related degree. We'll begin by hearing from Megan Fahey, Assistant Director of Strategic Programs of College of Engineering at Carnegie Mellon University. She will deliver our keynote presentation for this event. We will then transition into the Literary Arts and Social Justice career panel, featuring several professionals, including Barbara Johnson, Vice President of Race and Gender Equity at the YWCA Greater Pittsburgh, Ann Madarasz, Curatorial Division Director, Chief Historian, and Director of the Western PA Sports Museum at the Senator John Heinz History Center, and Chardae Jones, freelance writer and mayor of Braddock. We will then transition to closing remarks delivered by Dawnese Booker, Program Manager of Experiential Learning at the Professional Career Readiness Center at Point Park University. She will highlight the importance of maximizing your time at Point Park and utilizing Career Center resources before and after graduation for career success. So a little bit about the Professional Career Readiness Center. The Professional Career Readiness Center is proud to support this program and the development of literary arts and social justice students and alumni. The Professional Career Readiness Center provides programs and services to enhance student and alumni success by creating opportunities to achieve career readiness, increase knowledge of career pathways, and connect to experiential learning such as internships and co-ops. The center also assists students in developing professional skills and connecting to meaningful employment through strategic partnerships and targeted events. So just a few housekeeping tips before we get started. Speakers, if you could please stay muted until it is your time to present. And attendees, everyone is automatically muted and has their cameras turned off for them. So please utilize the Q&A function throughout the event. We will periodically answer questions throughout, especially during the panel portion. As a reminder, this event will be recorded. So let's transition into our keynote speaker. I would like to introduce you to Miss Megan Fahey, our keynote speaker for this event. Megan is the Assistant Director of Strategic Programs for the College of Engineering at Carnegie Mellon University. In this role, Megan coordinates all outreach and programming efforts. Megan is from Wheeling, West Virginia, and holds degrees in theater, English, secondary education, writing, and creative writing, which have provided her with opportunities to teach a wide variety of courses for a wide variety of audiences. Titled The Job with No Name, a trilogy of insights on interviewing, Megan will share and discuss her job hunting process from beginning, creating spreadsheets to keep applications organized, to end, how to productively reflect on one job in order to get another. She'll be sharing a few interviewing success stories and a multitude of failures, but regardless of the outcome, there is something new to learn in every conversation and experience. Framed by Sergio Leone's The Man with No Name trilogy, this presentation offers a candid look into the career search process, revealing the good, the bad, and the ugly. So with that being said, everyone please welcome Miss Megan Fahey. Thank you so much for joining us today.
Yeah, of course. Thank you, Kenneth. 1 second here while I get my screen shared. Here we go. Okay. You can see the screen. Everything looks okay. Thanks. Thank you for the feedback, everybody. All right. Hi, everyone. So before I get started today, I just want to take a minute to thank the event organizers. Thank you, Kenneth, especially for the fantastic introduction and for keeping me organized and for finding that photo and the bio to use, because I was supposed to send you one and I forgot to do that. So sorry about that. And I think I saw Dr. Perrier is on the call, and she was the one who first reached out to me about delivering this keynote today. So thanks to Dr. Perrier. Before I really get started, I want to give you a little bit of a rundown on how this keynote is going to work. I've titled this presentation, "The Job with No Name," and I've put it on this dusty old PowerPoint parchment template because when I was getting all my ideas together and I was trying to figure out how to organize them, I started thinking, you know what cool, hip young people in 2021 really can relate to? Westerns. So if you haven't seen the Man with No Name trilogy, don't worry about it. I'll fill you in as we go, but I do highly recommend them. Those movies are awesome. Okay. So my first section here, I've called A Fistful of Dollars. So I'm gonna get started. I was in college for 10 years. I spent 5 years at my undergraduate institution earning 2 bachelor's degrees, one in education and one in English, as Kenneth said. When I was finished there, I moved to Myrtle Beach to Coastal Carolina University, where I entered a 2-year Master's of Arts in Writing program. And then after that, I enrolled in the Master of Fine Arts in Creative Writing in Fiction at West Virginia University. I spent 3 years there teaching and writing and publishing, so 10 years total, 10 years. I had 10 years in college from August 2007 on my first day to May 2017 when I graduated from my MFA program to figure out what exactly it was I wanted to do when I was done with school. And in 10 years, I still did not figure it out. And so with no idea what I was doing or what I was looking for, I started applying for jobs because I had to. And I like to stay pretty organized. So I kept track of all the jobs that I had applied for over the course of that spring 2017 semester in an Excel spreadsheet that looks something like this. So full transparency, it didn't just look like this. This is my spring 2017 job application spreadsheet. And you might be looking at this sheet and you might be thinking, wow, Megan, you applied for a respectable number of jobs that semester. And that is true. But I also want to point out that this is only columns A through D of my spreadsheet. And so this was only the list of jobs that never emailed me back. So in that 6 months, these are the jobs that never emailed me back. I don't want to talk about those. I want to talk about slides, the columns G through J. These are my rejections. So in that time, I applied for all these jobs. Some didn't email me back. I have these rejections, and they say you're not supposed to highlight your rejections in red because it's bad for your self-esteem, but I obviously didn't really care about my self-esteem that semester. But I want to go back a slide and talk about my process for discerning which jobs were going to be the right ones for me. So the first thing you should know is that I had all of the online job trackers, right? I had an Indeed account, I had a monster.com account, I had a LinkedIn account, and I was getting emails every day. And I applied for literally anything I thought I could even be remotely qualified for. So there was that. If you also look at column C here, where it's got this city and state tag, you can see that I was kind of looking to stay in this area. There's a lot of Pittsburgh names there, but I was willing to move, for the right job. And if you look at the position titles, which are column A, you can see that toward the beginning, I was really ambitious about getting a job being teaching faculty. So I was really excited to be an English instructor. And then, a little bit of the way down, I was like, yeah, I want to be an English instructor, but I could probably take a job as a staff member too. Maybe I could be like a career counselor, advisor or something, and that would also be awesome. So I'm going to go ahead and apply for those. But then when you get a little closer to the bottom, you can also see the part where it was June and I still didn't have a job. And I all of a sudden was like, please, Robert Morris, please hire me to just sort your mail. I'll do anything you want, just hire me. But what I really want to really focus on today are columns M through P. These are my Lime jobs. And these Lime jobs are places that actually wanted to interview me. So if you're keeping notes or whatever, which you shouldn't be, here's my first piece of advice for this talk. Don't give up. When you are on the job market, especially when you are putting yourself out there for the first time, it is really, really easy to get discouraged. And I know that the majority of my slides so far have almost entirely been screenshots from Excel. And if spreadsheets are not really your thing, let me break this down into numbers. Over a period of 6 months, I applied for 75 jobs and I got 7 interviews. I got 7. So here's a little infographic that I made to help put this in perspective. For every 10 jobs, so this is 10 jobs, these are represented by these business people with the cool haircuts. For every 10 jobs that I spent hours agonizing over, and all the times that I rewrote my CV and my cover letter, and I begged my professors and my mentors to write me letters of recommendation, and I filled out all those online questionnaires where you have to put in the exact same material that you have on your resume, but you got to do it twice because they have like a AI bot that goes in and actually decides who's qualified. And then there's those other personality inventory tests that you have to take sometimes about workplace ethics, where you have to say on a Likert scale how likely you are to steal a pen. But for every 10 jobs that I spent time on that stuff, only one wanted to continue talking with me, to even have a first round conversation with me. And an even smaller percentage than that was actually interested after we spoke. So that's why my first piece of advice is don't give up, because there is hope. And here's how I know. If we go back to my columns in Excel for a second, because I love Excel, if you take a look at the dates all the way over on the right in column P, you can see that my interviews that I started getting, I wasn't successful until these jobs that I started applying to in March. You can see the 3/10 date stamps over there. And keep in mind that that's only when, those signify when I applied for the jobs. That's not when they got back to me or when they scheduled my interviews. My very first interview for one of these positions wasn't until April 20th. So I started applying in December, no interviews till April. But I want to talk a little about how this went. My first interview was with Tennessee Tech in Cookeville, Tennessee. The rest of this email, the part that I cut off, is just a list of names of faculty members that I was going to be Skyping with. There was a link to the university website where I could start kind of doing some preliminary research. And then there was an extremely comprehensive PDF highlighting everything you could ever want to know about the English department at Tennessee Technological University. And I looked at it, but I didn't know what to do with it. I had no idea what I was supposed to do with things like this. Right? So I get this table and it's a list of how many students are enrolled in how many courses. And I was just completely clueless on how to prepare for this. And the interview was hard. On top of all that, the committee asked me a lot of tough questions about things like rhetorical theory. And I half fumbled my way through. And when the person leading the committee search tried to lob a softball question to me just to like get my confidence up, he said, "Can you tell us a little bit about why you want to work at Tennessee Tech?" And instead of using this incredible data that they sent me to talk about their robust English department and their well-contained class sizes, instead, I said, quote, "Well, I saw the drone footage of your campus on your website, and that was pretty awesome." And that was my whole answer. And that's a direct quote, and it still haunts me. And I still think about it when I go to sleep at night, and I'll never forget it. And to the surprise of no one, I was not hired at Tennessee Technological University. There were a number of reasons for this, but frankly, the biggest one that stands out to me when I think about it is what I said. I just was not prepared. I was still a student. It was my first academic job interview ever, and I had no idea what to expect. But that was nothing compared to my interview at the University of Memphis, which I forgot I had until about 30 minutes before the interview was supposed to start. And one of the questions they asked me was, "Who's your favorite compositionist?" And I was so flustered that I said, "I don't know." And where I also actually at one point started singing that song, "Walking in Memphis" by Mark Cohn. And once again, to the surprise of no one, I didn't get that job either. And I almost had my next piece of advice be, don't sing Mark Cohn during your interview, but I don't think we need to, that goes without saying. We don't need to cover that. Okay, so I want to get back to the point. So there's a bunch of reasons why I went with the Western theme on this, including the fact that I love this trilogy, particularly this first installment of Fistful of Dollars, where this section gets its title. And so if you haven't seen A Fistful of Dollars, like I said, that's okay, but here's the plot. This handsome stranger, Clint Eastwood, arrives in a dusty old Western town that's ruled by two rival factions. And so you've got the Rojos, they live up there in that White House that you can kind of see in the background. And then kind of in the front, in the foreground, just here out of frame on this side, that's where the Baxters live. And so based on his wily cleverness and all his practical skills, both families end up offering Clint Eastwood jobs, working for them. And he's got to decide which job he wants to take that's going to end up being the most beneficial to him. There's a little more to it. That's the gist. So try to remember that because it's going to come back around. So after I failed big time at Tennessee Tech and then again at the University of Memphis, my next nibble was at this little place in Beaver, West Virginia called New River Community and Technical College, where they were interested in me becoming an instructor of English, which, as I said, that's what I wanted. I interviewed with the hiring committee over the phone and I didn't sing on the call. So that was already a step up from my last interview. And in defiance of my wildest expectations, they ended up inviting me to Beaver for an in-person interview and a tour of campus on June 14th, 2017, my first ever campus visit. So excited. And then not long after I got this interview scheduled, I got another email, this time from Point Park for a staff position, which I wasn't quite as excited about, but I was still pretty excited. And this email was from the assistant provost who oversaw at the time the Center for Teaching Excellence and was hiring a coordinator position. And he said he wanted me to participate in a video interview over Skype. And of course, he wanted to arrange that Skype session on June 14th, 2017. And because I was so desperate for a job and I was so saturated with insecurity, which probably had something to do with this red track that I had of keeping all these records, I was so afraid that if I rescheduled with either of these schools, that I was going to give them a bad impression. And so instead, I came up with this plan that I was going to drive all the way to Southern West Virginia on the night of June 13th and stay overnight at the nearby Country Inn and Suites. It's pictured right here. This is in Beckley, West Virginia. And then I thought, I could wake up the next day and I could do this Skype interview from my hotel room before I left for New River Community Technical College. So my Point Park call was scheduled at 12 o'clock, high noon. And I went downstairs and I told the desk clerk, I have this interview. Is it okay if I stay in my room to do the interview and do like a late checkout? And she said, no. And then I said, well, okay, that's fine. Is there like a conference space I can go to or like a business center or some quiet area where I can sit and do my Skype interview? And she said no again. And the only thing that saved me was that the Country Inn and Suites, I don't know if you could see it in the picture. It's got this wraparound front porch, which is unlike any hotel where I've ever stayed. And I thought, well, that'll be fine. And so I sat in a rocking chair. You can kind of see the rocking chairs at the bottom of the porch there. And I had the shutters of the windows behind me because it kind of makes you feel like you're at your grandma's house and you're like snapping peas. And the Skype call from Point Park came through almost immediately. And despite all the unusual circumstances around it, here's the craziest part about my Skype interview with Point Park. It was fun. I was certainly a normal amount of anxious, and I definitely wished I could have had more control over my environment, but I had a great time. And part of the reason this was the case is because I was prepared. Because for the first time ever, the person who was interviewing me sent me the questions in advance. This was unheard of for me. So if you look at these, they're not really easy questions, right? If I had been asked these questions on the spot, it's possible that I would have been able to come up with some smart answers that would have been satisfactory. But instead, I got a whole week from June 7th, when this email was sent, to June 14th to think smartly about them and to present my best answers. And I guess what I'm trying to say is that it was the first time that an interview felt more like it was about the committee discovering what my skills were and not assuming that my skills were improv and thinking on the fly, right? So that interview wrapped up, I packed up my stuff, and I drove off to my interview at New River Community and Technical College. And, I keep talking about it being in this little town, Beaver, and it might not sound like much, but this is it with the pillars. And also, I think I forgot to mention that my first interview of the day at New River CTC was with the college president. So I walk in to this very austere looking building, and my liaison meets me, and she takes me up to the president's suite. And I'm kind of sitting there, I'm a little nervous, I'm waiting for him. And this place I'm sitting, it's bigger and it's nicer than any room at any house of any place I've ever lived in my life. And looking around, and I happen to glance over at this like side table next to me. And I see these like what appears to be trophies. And so I look a little closer at the trophies, and they've got these disco balls on the top. So I've got pictures of them here. So there are these disco ball trophies. And I can't quite see what's engraved on the plaques at the bottom of the disco ball trophies. So I like kind of lean over, and I'm looking to see if I can see what these awards are for that are in the president's office. And I can't really see them because of the light. And I get a little closer and a little closer, and I'm just about to be able to crack it. And suddenly the president walks in, right? So I get a little nervous. So I stand up, I jump up out of the thing, pretending like I wasn't trying to see what his trophies were for. And we shake hands, and everything's going well, but I can't stop thinking about the disco ball trophies. And then we sit down in these like weirdly stiff armchairs. And before he even has a chance to ask me the first question, I just can't stop myself. And I turn to him and I say, "Hey, what's up with those disco balls?" That is my first question to the president of New River Community and Technical College. But you know what happened after that? I wasn't nervous anymore. Once I'd taken the time to talk to him, and what I learned was that these were the college president's back-to-back first place trophies in the Foxtrot category of Dancing with the West Virginia Stars Beckley edition. And it wasn't so hard to talk to him after that, because I realized he was just a person. He was normal. He was weird. But when we walked out of his office an hour later, and we were laughing and we were talking about music and dance and writing, I had a crazy thought that I had never had before. I thought, I am going to get this job. So I left his office, and I met back up with my liaison, and she told me that our next stop would be the college's recently acquired Advanced Technology Center. It might look like a warehouse to you in this picture. That's because it is a warehouse, but once you get inside, they have got some amazing stuff going on in there. Inside, where you can see the building is a little higher, it's all telephone poles and telecommunications stuff. And so the students get practical experience being able to climb those and work on transformers and install things and fix things. And there's a mechanics bay. I think it's right there where those garages are, if you can see this on the slides. And so the faculty and staff can actually drive right into the Advanced Technology Center, and the students always need cars to fix. So they'll fix your car for free. There's a welding shed in the back. There was like an ambulance that was cut in half because they do paramedic training and assessment there. And then inside, like tucked away, there was what looked like a little tiny house. And it was like a functional tiny house. And they told me that that's where my office would be, inside the tiny house in the Advanced Technology Center, which was cool. And I was excited about, like, I was going to have an office, and it was in a house. I would have like a front door. So that was going to be great. But they also said there's so much happening overhead in the Advanced Technology Center at all times that once I started teaching my classes there, I would be required to wear a hard hat at all times. And my head is big, so I wasn't crazy about the idea of wearing a hard hat every day, but I did love the idea that I was going to be an instructor of English, and at a place where I was like possibly going to be friends with the college president, and maybe, I took some dance classes, so maybe I could get in on that Foxtrot dance trophy disco ball thing. But then we went to leave the Advanced Technology Center, and I got back in the car with my liaison, Amanda, and she was driving me back from the warehouse to the main campus with the pillars. And I asked her, what are the students at New River Community and Technical College like? And her response was, well, let's be honest, they're not that smart. And I have to say, when you are an unemployed young person who has applied for more than 70 jobs, it is really, really difficult to imagine a scenario in which someone offers you a job and you turn it down for any reason. But I just got a bad feeling when I heard her say that. And to be clear, this bad feeling was not because I didn't want to work with students who were quote unquote not smart, but it was because I knew you had to be smart to do the kinds of things I saw those students doing in the Advanced Technology Center. My liaison just had a limited understanding of smartness. And because of that one remark, I started worrying that that might be a pervasive issue among the college. And could I work at a place that was so willing to be so dismissive of their students? 2 days later, I was invited to visit Point Park's campus. And my experience could not have been more different. When I met with the assistant provost, who would have been my boss, he didn't have any dance competition trophies to speak of, but he did have a lot of enthusiasm for the job, and he was wearing like bell bottoms. And when I asked him the same question about, like what are the students at Point Park like, he thought about it for a second and then said, they are delightfully wacky. And that seemed like it was going to be more my speed. So now, if you'll indulge me, I want to go back to a fistful of dollars, right? So by the end of this week, both institutions ended up offering me jobs. So instead of the rojos back there in the white hacienda in the background, you've got New River Community and Technical College. And then here in the foreground, you've got Point Park. And then you got Clint Eastwood in the middle. That's me, obviously. And now, instead of begging, like, please, someone, anyone, Robert Morris, hire me to sort your mail, I got to make a decision about what it was that I wanted to do and where I wanted to go and how I wanted to shape my career. In my offer letter from New River, they gave me sort of a scan of what kinds of classes I would be most likely to teach, including 2 advanced courses in business writing and technical writing, which I knew would help further my career as an English instructor. And then on the other side of that, I got an email from Point Park in which they said, the job isn't going to pay very much, but what it lacks in salary, it will make up for in the experience of the mechanics of higher education. And so I made a list of pros and cons. At New River, I would get to work with President Disco Ball, which was a pro. He seemed cool. But I would have to wear a hard hat every day. So that was a con. At Point Park, I'd get to live in a cool city and be like on a cool campus, and that sounded fun. But I'd also have to work for this guy every day, and that I wasn't sure about that. Also, if I can digress for a second, if you want to talk to someone about how to get a job when you're weird, you really should be talking to the provost. Anyway, you might think that I'm painting this as a very, very, very easy decision, but it was actually tremendously difficult because I didn't mention the one other major factor involved here, which is money. New River was offering me more of it and lots more of it. And turning them down also meant turning down more money, roughly $10,000 a year more, that's hard for me to talk about. So this gets me into part 2 for a few dollars more. So that's the second film in this trilogy. And so the plot of this one is like Lee Van Cleef, that's him on your right, Clint Eastwood, obviously on your left. These guys are both bounty hunters in this movie, and they're all tracking down this same bank robber, El Indio. And at the risk of really stretching this metaphor, I want to just like put some more labels on it, which at the end of your college career, you are all going to end up being occupational bounty hunters, and your target is a job, right? So we're all going after the same thing. There's us, there's all the other people that want the job, and we're all trying to track it down. So how do you do it? So in this second portion, I'm going to walk you through a couple of the interviews that I've been on recently, and then hopefully I can give you some more insight about navigating the process and things you can do to level up. So to begin, I did end up taking the position at Point Park, despite the major salary difference. There are a lot of reasons, but at the top of the list, I believed in that job. I believed I could make a difference in a way I never would have been able to do teaching business and technical writing, even though those things are important too. Sorry, I'm on the wrong thing here. In the last section, I highlighted a lot of stupid things that I said during my interview, but there were also moments I said a lot of smart things too. And one of the smartest things I did was to ask the person interviewing me how he imagined every day in the office to go. And he explained at that time, he was tasked with launching the Center for Inclusive Excellence, which is the logo I wanted to bring up here, which didn't yet exist in June of 2017. And which we would have the opportunity to co-create together. He said that in all likelihood, no day would look very similar to another, And there would be lots of opportunities for creativity and problem solving. And this checked all my boxes, which brings me to my first major point of this section. It's not only about money. I would be lying if I said it isn't about money at all, because that is not true. You do what you have to do to take care of yourself and live your life and pay your bills and all that stuff. And if I had truly needed that extra money at the time I was offered that job at the technical school in West Virginia, you can absolutely bet that I would have taken it. But when I looked at all the factors together and where I was at that point in my life, it really was like making an investment. The bet or the gamble that I made was that earning less for those first couple of years would pay off in the long run. And then it started to. So in 2019, when I was ready to leave Point Park and I went back on the job market, this time I didn't have to apply for 75 jobs and I didn't have to keep a multi-tab color-coded Excel spreadsheet like I'd done the first time to keep everything straight. This time I only had to apply for about a dozen before I started getting some hits, because even though I spent less than 2 years working at Point Park, I accumulated 3 really important things: actual experience, real skills, and a list of projects with verified outcomes. I could write a cover letter that highlighted problems that I'd solved and changes that I'd enacted. And so the first interview I landed this time was a Skype session with a faculty development team at Indiana University in Bloomington. The interview itself was unremarkable. I remember very little about it actually, except for the final question that they asked me, which was another sort of like very generous softball lob question from the person who was in charge of hiring. The question was, if I could have any superpower, what would it be? So at this point, I want to take the opportunity to remind everyone that I have a terminal degree in fiction writing. I could have said anything. I could have designed an entire literary universe around my superpower. We had been talking about businessy stuff and professional experience for 30 minutes, and now this place was finally giving me the opportunity to be myself and express my creativity and show them how I think. And instead, it took me such an awkwardly long time to think of something to say until I finally had to say something, or I had to say, it was time. I was out of time. And I said, I would have super strength, not just physical strength, but mental and emotional strength too. Because a lot of times I just don't feel like I'm good enough. I didn't get that job either, but that was okay. I learned from it. My next interview was at the College of Engineering at Carnegie Mellon, which obviously that one turned out okay. And one of my interviews there took place at the end of March. And it was one of those weird Pittsburgh March days where it's cold and sunny at the same time. So you can't dress too warm or you'll start sweating, but you can't like wear a jacket because, you can't dress too warm because you'll start sweating, but you can't not wear a jacket because if the wind picks up, you'll freeze, especially if you're already sweating. So in the morning of the day of the interview, I almost missed my bus to Oakland because I was standing there in front of my closet trying to decide if I should wear like a cool sporty blazer with my outfit in the interest of looking professional and trendy, or if I should wear like something heavier that would look less businessy, but do a better job keeping me warm. And I was still working at Point Park in the CIE at the time that all this was going down. And while I'm trying to make this decision, I get a work email from my boss, Dr. Brita, who comes in and the email comes in and at the bottom it says, are you feeling ready for your interview? Right. And I say, sort of, but I can't decide what jacket to wear. And his response was, if you really want to project confidence, you'll wear both jackets, which I didn't really believe at the time, but then I did. I ended up wearing both jackets to the interview that day. And that's my next piece of advice, right? Wear both jackets. I'm of course being figurative. Don't wear both jackets. Don't wear 2 jackets to an interview unless like that's really your thing. I would say it's very unlikely you're going to find yourself in a situation where you need to wear one jacket over top of the other. But it did give me confidence on that particular day, to the point where during one portion of my interview, I met with the college's HR recruiter, and it was like kind of warm in his office. And so I set down my bag and I took off my jacket while he was like getting our paperwork and getting himself situated. And I just set everything down on this table that was in a corner of his office. And by the time he sat down and saw that I had just set my stuff on his desk, he kind of, you know, looked at me and was like, oh, just put your stuff anywhere, I guess, make yourself at home. And my response to that, which surprised even me, was, if I don't get this job because of where I put my jacket, then I don't want this job. So I'd say I had come a long way since my verbal prayer for super strength in my last interview. Now, your version of wearing both jackets could be something like you wear mismatched socks, or you keep a lucky artifact of some kind in your pocket, or you get a pep talk from your dog before you leave your house. Or there was a thing for a while that if you stood in a Superman pose in the bathroom and looked at yourself in the mirror for a long time, that you would like just be filled with confidence. And researchers are starting to claim that it doesn't actually do anything physiologically for you. And I'm certainly pro research, but I'm also pro anything that makes you feel good and worthy before an interview. So if you are getting a phone call from an employer or an invitation to meet them, remember that that is because they are interested in you. It is not a fluke. They didn't accidentally dial your number when they meant to dial somebody else's number. They want to meet you. And your only job on these interviews is proving to them that they were right. So, you know, I got that job. That was all great. And I wouldn't say that I'm on the market again, really super actively, but I do apply for interesting jobs when I see them come around. So in February 2020, about a year ago, I was scrolling through jobs on LinkedIn, and some of you may have seen this. I get this email that the FBI is hiring special agents. And I've watched TV, so I'm looking at this like, wouldn't it be funny if I applied? And then I found myself not really laughing and was like, maybe I should apply. And so I sent my resume in just like on a whim. And then the craziest thing happened, which was they got back to me and said, we want you to start taking the FBI tests. So I did. I started taking the test to be a special agent in the FBI, not joking about this. The first phase was a logic and reasoning exam that I had to take at a third-party test site, sort of like the SAT or the GRE or any of those standardized tests you've had to take. And when I checked in, the woman proctoring the exam, she like patted down my pockets, and then she told me she had to examine my glasses to see if I had somehow hidden notes or some way to cheat on my lenses. And I was like, if I could figure out a way to cheat just by using my glasses, the FBI should hire me immediately. And the woman laughed out loud when I said this. And her response was, well, I hope they do, because the Bureau could use more people with a sense of humor. I didn't realize that might be one of their criteria. They seem all pretty serious to me. By the time I got to my car in the parking lot of the testing site, I already had an email from the FBI that I had passed the phase 1 test. And the next phase would be a virtual meet and greet over Skype, which I hadn't used in a couple of years since the last time I was doing interviews. And so it took me an extra minute or two to get logged on because I like forgot my password because I'm not good at that stuff. And then I was finally on the call, and the agent leading the Skype session, you could tell he had kind of been waiting for me to get there. And so he asked if, you know, how I was doing. And I gave the like standard, very effusive, like, I'm Megan, I'm a creative writer. I'm really excited to be here today. I have these cats. So if you see these cats in the background, like, I apologize in advance for my cats. And then he asked if we were ready to get started. And the other 3 people on the call, who were all adult men, were like, yes, sir, we're ready. And I realized I'd maybe been reading the meet and greet session wrong. But somehow, even after that, they still called me a competitive applicant. I have a picture of this. I want to make sure that I show you. Competitive. I blocked out my number here because I feel like that's illegal for me to show you or something. So they recommended to the FBI headquarters in Virginia that I be considered as a candidate and that I get to continue moving forward with the tests. So phase 2 is a written exam, and I passed that one, but come on, it was a 5-paragraph interview, 5-paragraph essay. I mean, you just had to write a 5-paragraph essay, and I've been kind of training for that my whole life. So that one was fine. But then after that, I finally got to do a face-to-face interview at the FBI headquarters in Pittsburgh, which I don't know if you've seen this place. It's in the South Side, and it's kind of like, it's right next to the Cheesecake Factory. So I don't know, it made me laugh. And I can't legally get into the nuts and bolts of the interview questions because I had to sign a non-disclosure agreement when I got in there, but I can tell you all the stuff that's kind of freely available in their testing overview PDF. The interview structure for FBI candidates is not designed to be tricky, but to be orderly and structured exactly as you might imagine from a government agency. As a candidate, you have 60 minutes to answer 13 questions. And get this, the questions are provided ahead of time. Your answers should align with the core competencies of the organization. And within that time frame, you must answer each question with a personal experience based on the question you are being asked, an explanation about how you made a decision during that situation, and then talk about the outcomes of those decisions. Then you repeat and repeat and repeat that a total of 13 times. And the whole time you're answering these questions, you're speaking into a recording device that's on the middle of the table. And the other agents that are interviewing you have pen and paper, and they are writing down literally everything you say. And I think it's all just a ploy for them to not make eye contact with you because they never look up once, and it is very jarring. And so I was, again, very surprised when in December, 2 months ago, not even, I get this email that is an offer letter from the Department of Justice to be a conditional special agent for the FBI, which I told everybody about because I wanted everybody to start calling me conditional special agent Fahey, at least for the 2 weeks that the FBI gave me to make this enormous decision. And if I said yes, that meant that the Bureau would begin their exceptionally invasive background screening process in which they talk to pretty much every person you've ever met in your entire life as a character reference. Then I would have had to have moved to Quantico, where I would live in a dorm for 20 weeks while I got my firearms and espionage training. And then I would have to move to whatever city they told me to move to do whatever it was they wanted me to do. And the more I thought about it, the more I was like, that's really not what I'm looking for at this point in my life. So I turned down the FBI, which is so weird to say. But I'm glad I went through the process, not only because now I get to make all my friends call me former conditional special agent Fahey, but also because I'm able to use a lot of the stuff I learned while I was taking all those tests. And it all comes all the way back around, all the way full circle, back to Point Park in this job that I had in the Center for Inclusive Excellence and the department's learning happens everywhere motto that I got to help implement. So that's my next tip in this section. Whether the jobs you interview for are unexpectedly successful or embarrassingly colossal failures, and I have had plenty of both, there's always something to learn from them. So don't just clear them out of your memory banks, reflect on them and learn. For example, 2 weeks ago today, I had a phone interview with MIT. And like most places, the HR recruiter for that job did not send his questions in advance. So it was up to me to figure out how to prepare for this one on my own. So I started thinking back on my FBI training and the structured pace of that situation, decision, outcomes model that they use. And I thought, well, maybe I'll try that. So I took the job description from MIT's website and I put it into a Word document and I separated out each of the tasks that it listed. And then I just started writing examples that I might name if I were talking about my experience working with faculty or community programs or students, and then what decisions I made in those scenarios, and then what the outcomes of those decisions were. And when the day of the interview came, yeah, of course I was nervous, but I was ready. It didn't feel like I was guessing anymore. It felt like I knew the answers to the questions I was being asked because I did. I haven't heard anything about that job. I have no idea if anything will come for it. But it did feel like an important step as a person who will likely do a bunch more interviews in the future. And since you all are likely those people as well, I want to wrap up today by mentioning some of the other advice I've gotten throughout the years. And this is the part where I talk about the good, the bad, and the ugly. I will say that the film, The Good, the Bad, and the Ugly is like 3 hours long. And it's like a lot of that same revenge triangle stuff. There's a scene where I think they all accidentally join the army, but it's weird. And while it's the most well-known, it's my least favorite. So I'm just going to kind of skip over the movie part and just kind of get to the point here. Interviews are unpredictable, but there are things that you can do now before you ever submit materials that can increase your opportunities for success. So let's talk about some good advice. In my time as a person with a career, perhaps the greatest lesson that I have learned is that there is no better way to accumulate skills than by saying yes whenever possible. In addition to giving you a wide breadth of experiences, taking on new projects teaches you the mobility skills that are necessary for advancement Mobility skills, we used to call these soft skills, but we call them mobility skills now. We'll call them something else, I'm sure, soon. But you know what these are: problem solving, creativity, teamwork, critical thinking, time management, asking for help, all that stuff. Which, that reminds me, ask for help is another good tip. Anyone who is on this webinar who knows me knows that this is by far my weakest skill, is asking for help. But 3 weeks ago, I found out that I'd made it through the first round of a diversity and inclusion position at the School of Computer Science at Stanford. And their version of an interview is sending out 5 essay questions where they expect a 500-word response for each question, all due within 72 hours of receipt. So as a writer, I knew that I could do it, but I also knew that I couldn't do it alone. So I called on a number of friends and colleagues at a variety of stages throughout the process. Like, I knew I'd be able to come up with the ideas for my answers, but I did set up a call with one of my former bosses to talk through the shape of the ideas and how to frame them in the essay. And then after I had all the questions drafted, I emailed them to another former boss I'd had in my MFA program, who line edited all my work and challenged some of my answers and gave me good feedback. But I am showing some of the feedback here. I don't know if you'll have time to read it all. But all of this was done within the limits of the deadline that I was facing, which was now hours away at this point, right? So all of this asking for help, this saying yes when possible, this all kind of lumps in with my final piece of good advice here, which is meet people if you can. If I can share just one more quick story. I know we're coming up on 4:30 here. In 2014, so we're jumping backwards a little bit, I started applying for MFA programs, and I had very little luck. I had applied to 7 schools. I'd been rejected by 4. I'd been waitlisted at 3. And one of my professors suggested that I make time over spring break to actually visit WVU, which was one of my waitlist schools, and to meet some faculty. He said there was something to be said, especially in creative fields, for actually introducing yourself beyond your paper application, and for proving to the people making decisions that you can balance your weirdness with your stability. So I drove to Morgantown and I met with the head of the creative writing department, and he took me to a nearby cafe for a cup of coffee and to talk about my writing sample. He said the program had seen a big surge in applications, and that there were nearly 100 applicants just in fiction, and that my packet was ranked 5th. So the good news was that I should be proud, since this put me in the top 5% of candidates. But the bad news was that WVU only accepts 2 writers in each genre per year. Offer letters had already been sent. Candidates had until April 15th to finalize their decisions. And what this meant for me was that not only would the top 2 candidates need to turn down their offers for me to get in, but the candidates behind them would also have to turn down their offers before I even had a chance at a spot. So the odds were against me, he said, but I was close and I should keep at it. And by the next spring, my writing would probably improve enough to make the cut. So the April 15th final decision deadline for the MFA program came and went, and I hadn't moved off the wait list, so I kind of gave up. But on April 22nd, 1 week after the deadline, I got a phone call asking if I would still be interested in a spot in the creative writing program at WVU. So I took it, and when I got to campus in August, the professor I'd met with told me how all of this had ended up unfolding. Apparently in a department meeting, an administrator announced that there was 1 extra budget line for 1 more graduate assistant, and it was open to any program that wanted it. And this professor that I had met with leapt up immediately and had my phone number in his hand. So I apologize if anyone on this webinar is one of those 2 other people who ranked 3rd and 4th in the applicant pool of the creative writing fiction program at West Virginia University in 2014 for cutting the line. But the reason that this happened, which the faculty member told me explicitly, was that even though my writing sample wasn't the strongest in the batch, during my visit to campus, I had proven that I was dedicated and smart and professional and ambitious, and most importantly, worth the investment. So meet people if you can. It's not always about who you know, but it also doesn't hurt to know people. And if in-person socializing isn't your thing, especially right now, that's fine. Join an online club, join an esports league, meet new people, learn new skills, join a book club, join a gardening circle, join a writing group, meet people. And now I'm going to move on to the bad advice. When I was in my final semester of my MFA program, a faculty member who had recently earned her PhD in transatlantic modernism met with us monthly to give us tactical tips for getting hired. And every session to me was more frustrating than the one before it because her tips always prioritized one particular future, how to get a job as a tenure track faculty member at a research university, as she had done. And she had gotten a degree from the University of Chicago, which good for her. That place is awesome and ranks among the top 10 most prestigious universities nationally every year. And even with those credentials, she could, quote, only get a job at West Virginia. That's what she told us. So in turn, if we were getting our PhDs at West Virginia, our best bet was to prepare for careers in total obscurity. And if we were earning lesser degrees, like an MFA in creative writing, for example, forget about it. We should probably just plan on never having a job again for the rest of our lives. And I'm not necessarily calling out this person, even though I totally am, because it still makes me mad. But the rest of this bad advice is just from this one person, right? That was our job talk person. She said, you will only advance in an interview if you wear a black or navy suit, or sometimes gray if you are lucky. This is false. Some of the best interviews or the most memorable ones for me that I've been on are ones where I was wearing crazy colors like magenta or big black and white horizontal stripes, or something that made me feel both comfortable and confident. And I think that is far more important than being a person who wears a black or navy or gray suit. So don't worry about adhering to other people's made up color codes. Like, wear the thing that makes you feel comfortable and confident. The second piece of bad advice she gave us was never wear skirts, because you will be dismissed immediately for your femininity. And not only is this false, but it is a terrible thing to say. And if this ends up being true for you at a job interview, if you feel like you're being dismissed for your femininity, that is a pretty good sign you don't want to work at whatever place is doing that to you. So that's a red flag. And then the worst one of all, be yourself, but not to yourself. That was her advice to us on getting a job. So this one was by far the most egregious. She told us, talk about your hobbies, but not if they're weird hobbies. If you don't have any non-weird hobbies, pretend to have normal hobbies like cooking and yoga. Those were her examples, cooking and yoga. Do not do this. Do not make up hobbies. No company or organization is going to dismiss you because you have a weird hobby. But don't say you like to cook or do jigsaw puzzles just because those are safe hobbies to have. If you like those things, that's cool. It's going to come across that way. But pretending to be someone you're not always comes off as disingenuous. And most employers want to work with diverse groups of sincere candidates who know their strengths and know their weaknesses and know their talents. So if your weird hobby is, I don't know, for example, maybe you are the guitar player in a country western inspired Dungeons and Dragons themed punk rock black thrash band with your former boss, who is now the provost at Point Park. This is a quick plug for Wraith Rider. You should check us out on Bandcamp. That's fine. Places are still gonna want to hire you. So I want to close this keynote with this article headline that I saw in the Reductress a couple days ago, because it's hilarious and it's true. And yeah, I have a cool job now, and it's at a cool university, and it's in a career field that 10 years ago, when I was getting ready to graduate from college, I never could have predicted. It's been rewarding and it's been challenging, and it allows me to pay my bills, which is important, but it's certainly not what I want to do forever. But when I tell people this, their next question to me is usually, so what do you want to do forever? And the truth is, I don't know. I didn't pick getting an English degree because I had a particular future in mind as an Englisher. I just was pursuing a field that I enjoyed while also accumulating as many skills as I could. And when I sit back and think about what my next step will be, or the next step after that, or the next step after that, what I realize is that there is no name for the thing that I want to do in the future. And giving it a name or a label and pursuing only that thing, it just closes me off to so many other alternate realities and quantum timelines that I could easily manifest if I didn't give the job a name, right? So that's the advice I want to leave you with today. Work hard, be yourself, and remain on the lookout for the job with no name. Thank you.
Megan, that was awesome. I loved all the stories that you shared, and especially the end.
Oh, thanks.
If students can take one thing away from that, I think it's be yourself. Don't be someone you're not, and don't stray too far away from that. Don't be afraid to share what your interests are with job interviews and employers, because if they might deem it as quirky and weird and not hire you because of that, maybe that's not the job for you then. But I think that's really good advice that you shared with our students here. But I do want to transition into the Literary Arts and Social Justice career panel. So as a reminder, we have several notable professionals with us today, including Barbara Johnson, Vice President of Race and Gender Equity from the YWCA of Greater Pittsburgh, and Madarasz, Curatorial Division Director, Chief Historian, and Director of the Western PA Sports Museum at the Senator John Heinz History Center, and then Chardae Jones, freelance writer and mayor of Braddock. So panelists, welcome and thank you for being here today. I would also like to transition and introduce Dr. Kirsten Hanley, Associate Professor in the Department of Literary Arts and Social Justice. She will serve as our moderator for the panel discussion this evening. Dr. Hanley, welcome and thank you for joining us today.
Thank you so much, Kenny. Please call me Kirsten. I wanted to first thank Kenny Anderson and Monica Ritter and everyone at Professional and Career Readiness Center for putting this wonderful panel together. I also wanted to thank our amazing panelists. Thank you so much for being here, as well as our keynote speaker, Megan Fahey. Thank you so much for returning and sharing with us this evening. And also, I wanted to make sure that I called attention to the contributions of our students who shared a range of different questions with us this evening for our wonderful panel. We have questions on a variety of different topics on education, career experiences, tips for moving forward. And I was hoping at the request of our students that we could first start out with some introductions and just with a sense of how your educational backgrounds prepared you for your current careers. And in so doing, if you wouldn't mind letting me know name or pronouns that you prefer to be called, I'd appreciate that.
Well, my name is Chardae Jones. My pronoun is she. I am the mayor of Braddock. I'm the youngest mayor in my town's history. I'm also an IT business analyst at HMHS, which is Highmark's IT company. I am a freelance writer, self-publishing consultant, and most recently during the pandemic, I became a podcast co-host with some of my friends. I grew up in Braddock my entire life, and I graduated from Woodland Hills. It was a pretty diverse high school. I've always loved writing. I remember sitting down with my high school English teacher, and she asked me what I wanted to be when I grew up, and I told her I wanted to be an English teacher like her. And she said, do you really want to be an English teacher? She was like, you write very well. Are you sure you don't want to maybe go to school for writing? And I was like, I thought about it, but there's no money in that. And she was like, if you like it, just do it. And that kind of like resonated with me. So I applied to the school that I always wanted to go to, Carleton University, and they accepted me. And I was so excited because I knew my cousin went there growing up, and I stayed as a kid on an overnight, and it just stuck with me one day. So I grew up at the Braddock Library, and that was our after school program. That was my summer camp. So I've always been in love with books. I then ended up at Carlo. I graduated in 2011, and they instilled leadership, volunteering, and all of that in me so deeply that after graduation, I just became a professional volunteer. I joined AmeriCorps, I became a flight attendant, a secretary, you name it, I probably did it. I worked in pretty much every department of a school that wasn't the financial aid department. And it's just all that to say that one of the biggest things I've learned is the power of and. I just knew growing up, I said, all I'm going to do is I'm going to be a writer. You can't tell me anything. Rejection after rejection, I said, I'm going to be a writer. But I was pigeonholing myself, and I didn't know that. And it's always great not to pigeonhole yourself.
Barbara Johnson here. Thank you so much for inviting me to the Point Park Literary Arts and Social Justice Career Summit. I'm going to tell you a little bit of a story so that you get a sense of who I am. So back when I was a teen, it was with great clarity that I chose to major in dance when I was preparing for college admissions process. I had reflected on the fact that so many people I knew were in jobs that in no way connected to their degrees. My family had always valued education, and without any financial means or potential, concluded that after high school would be college. So I decided I would go to college and major only in the things that I enjoyed. I selected Mercyhurst College up in Erie, Pennsylvania, because they had a dance major and a clothing and textiles minor. I also had a strong belief that it would be the degree, not the subject matter, that would get me into the job market. Beyond that, I had no plan and even rejected valuable opinions that I should at least minor in something more practical like teaching. Determined and assertive, I rejected any advice and followed my own path. With my performing arts degree in hand, I landed my first job as a seamstress in a costume shop and a part-time position teaching creative movement for the community college. And then I moved on to be a program director at the YWCA, running summer day camp for kids and a daycare. I also went on to be a certified fitness instructor while I was at the YWCA. And there I did teach fitness classes as well as teaching for the community college continuing education program. My next position was at a university where I managed the student volunteer program, which is now called Service Learning. And my boss at that university asked me if I would be interested in a new position, serving as their first director of multicultural programs. I accepted that position, and that was the shift of my professional career. One of the values in the higher education community was professional development. So I chose conferences and workshops that would enhance my knowledge about diversity, inclusion, and racial justice. Another perk of the university was attending university classes for free or a low cost. So I went on to earn my master's degree in educational leadership because I believe that I really enjoyed the higher education community. And I did focus on women and race in that master's degree. So here I am today working at YWCA Greater Pittsburgh as an educator and social justice professional. I am still a seamstress and I still love to dance, doing salsa, Zumba, and soul line dancing. Thank you.
That's great. Thanks, Barbara. My name's Ann Madarasz, and I'm at the Heinz History Center. And I grew up in a small town on the other side of the state outside Philadelphia. I was a big reader as a kid. I loved to read biographies and actually set out to read every book, every biography in the little library in the town where I grew up. And then I really got into historical fiction. And when I was in high school, I realized after 10th grade, I was never going to be a math student. I was never going to be a scientist. So I decided, kind of a little bit outside the norm of what was regular, I wasn't going to take any more math or science. I was only going to take history and English classes. And so for my junior and senior years of high school, that's pretty much what I did. I went to college thinking I would be a history major or an English major, and kind of fell into the social sciences because I think what really captured me in that reading I did as a kid was this interest in people's stories, this fascination with the lived experience and what made people tick. And so I double majored. I went to Trinity College in Hartford, Connecticut, and I double majored in psychology and sociology. I got out of college. It was a recession. I had thought about being a social worker. I realized that if I went that way, I would have trouble getting a job because there were big cutbacks going on in nonprofits. So I took a job as a corporate recruiter and another job in market research, and I hated both. And one of the things that I'll agree with Megan is, kind of follow your heart. Sometimes the money or the desire to have a job is less important than the fact that you really love what you're doing. So I decided after a couple of years of work to go back to school. And I thought, I love the experience of learning. And I had thought all through my life that maybe I'd like to be a teacher. So I thought I'd like to teach high school and coach field hockey and lacrosse like I had played all my life. So I went to Westchester University to get certified to teach. Unfortunately, because I had not been a history major, and because I was not a strong European and British history student, I ended up taking American history and education. And about halfway through my master's degrees, I realized I really wanted to teach at the university level. So I finished up at Westchester and I applied, but I couldn't go into history, plain old history, so I didn't have that core background. So I took what's called American Civilization at the University of Pennsylvania. Most places call it American Studies. And it was the perfect thing for me because it was social sciences, it was literature, it was film, it was music. It was kind of the human condition and the human story. In 1990, I got married and my husband got transferred from Philadelphia to Pittsburgh. We moved to Pittsburgh in January of 1991. I always tell people don't move to Pittsburgh in January. If you don't know anybody, which we didn't, nobody wants to see you in January. It's cold. We lived in a second floor apartment in Shadyside with these big old windows. It was a Victorian house. And I sat there as he went off to work at 6 o'clock every morning, knowing nobody and watching it snow sideways out the window and thinking, man, this is the grayest, darkest, coldest place I've ever been in my life. What am I going to do with myself? And then began my journey to find a career. And I applied. I couldn't get a teaching job. I didn't have a network of connections here in Pittsburgh. I was going back and forth in Philadelphia because I wasn't done my graduate work. And I was a little bit lost. And I was applying for everything. And these are back in the days where, you were still opening up the newspaper and looking at jobs in the newspaper, not like today. And I applied for a job at the Historical Society of Western Pennsylvania. And it was writing a curriculum package. And I got an interview. And then I didn't get the job. And I thought, what am I going to do? I applied for another job, a teaching job, but they wanted me to come and teach do a demonstration teaching job at a private school. And I thought, if they don't trust me enough to hire me without seeing me in the classroom, maybe this isn't the right match. And it was for literally no money. I think it was $12,000 a year. So I did the wise thing and I waited until somebody passed my resume around at what's now the History Center at the Historical Society. And they said, hey, you should interview this person. She's got great experience. She would be great in a museum. And they called me up and they said, we have a 3-month job. Are you interested in working here? And I had never worked in a museum, but at Penn, that was one of the things you could study. You could study material culture, working with objects and music and film and images as sources of stories. So I said, sure, I'll take a job for 3 months. So I started out at the History Center in 1992 at $6 an hour. So believe me, it was not, with my 3 master's degrees, my almost PhD, and my 2 undergraduate degrees, it was not a job, Megan, that I took for the dollars. There were no dollars. It was a job I took to meet people, find some connections in Pittsburgh, and move on to something better. Well, 29 years later, I'm still there. So there's more story to be told about that. But that's how I got to kind of where I am today.
Thank you so much for those insightful and inspiring stories to start us off. To begin with a bit of a deeper dive focused on education, I first have a question for Barbara. So we understand, as you spoke to, that you have a range of experience in diversity, social justice, and higher education, also in creative writing, as you are currently pursuing your MFA in creative writing. And students were wondering if they could hear a bit about what inspired you to pursue creative writing and how you're thinking about drawing upon that work to advance race and gender equity efforts.
Thank you. I was working at a university at the time, and I had been doing a lot of writing in my work, and had met a number of people who were already in the creative writing program. And someone said, "Oh, you should come to one of these." They had guest speakers coming in all the time. And so I attended and I really enjoyed it. And so I thought, well, maybe I should figure out if I could be a creative writing person. And so I applied, I put an application in, and much like Megan described, I didn't know what to put in as a sample. And so I felt totally unqualified to be accepted into the program because of what I submitted. So I submitted not your typical creative writing work. It was nonfiction that I was interested in, but I submitted a number of articles that I had written for a dance magazine, a local dance publication. And so I submitted as many as I could to get to the word count. And it was all the same, not the same topic, but the same story rather, but the same topic for sure. And when I went for my interview, which I was super surprised that I even got, one of the things that they had talked about was how important it was for them to have more diverse candidates in their group, so that when they have their times where they talk about their writing, that they have different opinions and different critique. And so they did ask me to submit something else, and I did, and it was a piece on race. And I didn't know if it was any good or not, but they were blown away by it. And so when I got into the program, I made a conscientious decision that I would definitely write about my experiences with race, because that's what I know really well. And I haven't finished the program yet. And I think it's because writing about something that's so intense to you, sometimes it feels like you have to take a break from it because it just gets too intense. And with some of the situations that have been happening in our society, I have just felt like I needed to pull away from that for a while. But that's how I got into the program. It was pretty mishap.
And I appreciate that. I think it's so helpful for students to know that things don't always play out the way that we anticipate necessarily. And you use the term mishap, and obviously one with a really productive outcome. Thank you so much. So next we have a question for Anne, and we're wondering about if you could speak a little bit further to the kinds of writing or academic experiences that you had in preparation for your career, and perhaps how those translated into the kinds of work that you are doing now as the director of the Curatorial Division and chief historian at the Heinz History Center. Like how those experiences with your education perhaps translated into the work that you're doing at present.
I think because my background was so broad and varied, it did end up being something that worked with the job that I have now. Even though I never intended to be in a museum, I always intended to teach. I had the experience of working with objects, working with music, working with oral histories, working with biography and images, and interpreting those critically, thinking about them and what they meant, what they were telling us, and the real training in historical analysis, how to use primary documentation from a variety of sources to get at the root story of something, and then how to share it and interpret it. So my training as a historian and the kind of writing that you do as a historian, especially at the graduate level, where you're really delving into original source material and then trying to come away with it with your own ideas, really helped and prepared me for the work that I do now. I think the thing that's been the most surprising to me is as my career has progressed, the world has changed dramatically. And the types of writing that we do now as historians, especially in the museum field, has changed so much. I work with guest historians all the time, and when I tell them I need to be able to tell this story in 200 words or less, they're blown away or flabbergasted. That's like, oh my gosh, how do I do that? Well, all of your students now are getting that kind of experience in social media. They're telling stories every day about themselves or their world or their experience in 140 characters or in 3 sentences or on Facebook in a paragraph. So all of us are learning how to communicate ideas and interpret the world around us and share it with other people in shorter bites than we ever did before. So for us as historians, our challenge has now been to embrace that writing and to be able to know everything that we had to know before to talk about something in a 200-page book or a 10-page article or a 5-paragraph essay, but to be able to say it to people in 3 sentences. So being able to edit ourselves, being able to get to the most important kind of nugget of information. And I think, as Megan demonstrated earlier in her remarks, being able to tell a story in a way that engages people and takes them on a journey, that captures their imagination, that gets them to look up from their phone and gets them to think about or see the world or have an experience or an insight or share something with people in a whole new way. I mean, that's really the magic of writing and communicating now that we all have had to learn and embrace.
Thank you, Anne. And it sounds like those are strategies and approaches for communication that would translate into any field or career, regardless of where you're heading. And I even think about the importance of the soundbite as so significant in the humanities, broadly speaking now. Someone who's working in publishing in the field of literary arts, for example, is, I think, thinking about audience in new and different ways at this point, and we're always having to evolve. Yeah, thank you so much. So Chardae, students were wondering about a bit more about your experience as the current mayor, and let me know if I'm off base, but I think as you said as the youngest of Braddock, mayor of Braddock, and how your education and perhaps extracurricular involvement perhaps prepared you for this experience.
It's so funny because my entire college experience, I was always volunteering, and I wanted to shy away from politics, but it's kind of always been there in the background, and I would just never knew it until reflecting after becoming the mayor. What's interesting is while I was there at Carlo, I was actually participating in I think it was only my sophomore year, I was participating in a protest at City County building because the former mayor mayor of Pittsburgh wanted to instill a tuition tax. So we got all of the student governments together, and we went down and marched to the City County building and said, we oppose this thing that you want to do to the college students. And I didn't think of that as advocacy or not. I just thought of it as volunteering and just speaking up. And those leadership opportunities kind of helped shape my political career that I never thought in a million years that I would be here. Like, they didn't have a student government structure where it was like a democracy where people could vote and that type of thing. So I was part of the class that got to help create this student government association. And I ran on a platform of diversity while at Carlo, and it was kind of premature per se. It was pretty tense on campus, and I ended up taking a senator position anyways instead of the vice president role that I went for, which I guess I was shooting for the stars. And I'll never forget my best friend sitting me down and saying, "Hey, I'm running for president. I want you to run for vice president." And I was like, "I know nothing about politics. I'm the editor of the newspaper and I just want to be on campus activities board." And she's like, "No, you could do this." And after becoming mayor, I tapped her and I said, "I think you had something to do with this." It's just those little things, that those volunteer opportunities that help shape this political role that I stepped into. I never saw it coming, and I just kept saying yes to things after a while, and that is how I ended up here. And it's very important to take those little opportunities to help shape for something else, because you never know where it's going to lead you.
Thank you, Chardae. Thank you for sharing that, and I'm glad you said yes. And while you're speaking in more detail to your path here, I have another question for you. So students were wondering about your journalism, graphic design, freelance writing experience, and what kind of prompted those particular, I guess, avenues for you, and what kind of inspiration you've perhaps garnered from those avenues?
I guess it's because I've always used writing as advocacy. If it wasn't for reading books growing up, I probably would have gotten into a lot of trouble. Like growing up at the library, that was like our safe haven. And I kind of use writing and creative outlets as a way to pay it forward in my community. For instance, when I was doing AmeriCorps, I was finding any way to include creative outlets and writing into the teenagers that I was mentoring, so they could hopefully pass it down. And if I wouldn't have had that, the opportunity to study writing and to study communications, and just having these roles of journalism and this background that I come into that helped shape me, I wouldn't be able to pass it forward. And giving someone else an outlet, hoping that I could not create the next me, but give someone else hope. Because Braddock isn't known for being one of the, it's not a very rich community. It's a pretty poor community. And having an outlet sometimes creates an outlet. And after my first job of graduating from Carlo, I lost my first professional job as a secretary, because they gave us all raises and then they laid us all off after realizing they shouldn't have done that. And and it's interesting is that's when I joined AmeriCorps, and after that was over, I ended up being a flight attendant. I had no idea, like I thought I bombed the interview because I was so relaxed, and it's one of the most stressful interview processes. But when you don't really want a job and you just show up because I was like, oh, there's food here, and I got to go to Dallas. But that job let me travel the world a little bit, so I could see what else was out there and go back and say, hey, I want to do something for my community and make it better than how I left it. And that will linger with me forever.
Thank you, Chardae. And if I may say so, I really appreciate your emphasis on paying it forward and making things better than they were, drawing upon your writing experience, because I know that we have quite a few students who are thinking about how to translate the writing that they're doing right now in the academic setting into social justice work in the future.